Hi, this is Andrea Jones. This is my Module 12 on tort liability for EDL 850. What is tort liability? I'll be honest, I never heard of tort liability prior to this module. And when education refers to educators being held liable for potentially like student injuries, it could be mental or physical, or neglect or anything like that. Ideally, state funded schools are not subject to being sued because of public money is basically how it's being run. Two main types of tort education is intentional and unintentional. Intentional would be when someone is obviously intentionally hurts or harms. An example is typically assault or battery. Unintentional is typically, the most common is neglect. And I love this definition. It was from one of the readings. Failure to exercise the standard of care, and that's the key word, that is reasonably prudent person would have exercised in a similar situation. So having that standard of care, I think, is the key factor in that. And the most common, like I said, is a supervisory issue, incidents that might occur under your watch as an educator. First one case I'm going to talk about was the Rogers and Akron City Schools. It was one of that was discussed in our reading, but I thought it was interesting that the first grade teacher was charged with assault, civil battery, negligent infliction of emotional duress when grabbing and pushing a first grader into line. I thought that was interesting. The reactive measurement administrator, obviously, and I got this, and I thought this was interesting. I was looking all over for what was our guidelines, asked my principal, and he said every incident is unique. And so when looking at this, I found this in our NEA guidelines. So obviously when something like this, a claim is made, administrator, they would investigate it. They would give oral or written communication to the employee. If it were formal or informal. Depending on what the findings came to include it as formal, then they implement a plan from the administrator, and within our standards for our district, we have 15 days to do that. And then admin superiors will be included in the evaluation, and finally HR also is included in for any formal documentation or anything that we need to move forward from at that point on. With that being said, though, with any time a student is in harm's way, removal would probably be the first guideline in that case. Okay, and giving chance to investigate if needed. Proactive, continually stress the importance of code of ethics as an educator through modeling, communication, staffing, like education. I thought it was interesting. One of the things that and again, I'm personally not special education, but that CPI training or the intervention, I think that's key to know what that is and how that's looked at. Professional ethics, I think, guides your actions and interactions with students for a safe and moral manner to achieve the highest standards in educational setting. One of the things I wanted to share, though, I found this while I was investigating. I thought this was a great, this little blurb. It says, restraint is the use of bodily force, a sustainable limit of students' movement. Contact that is consensual, solicited, unintentional, provide comfort, assistance, hug, whatever. Physical escort is not a restraint. And that's talking about the CPI training. And I just looking at it from a point of view, and if you're breaking up a fight or something like that. Physical escort includes the temporary touching or holding of the arm, wrist, and shoulder, who is acting out of a purpose of inducing, not forcing, to walk in a safe location. I just thought that was interesting. I love how it was worded, and it just kind of puts it into play. I think so as an educator to be mindful of that and knowing what is appropriate. Me personally, I don't put my hands on students ever. I mean, a hug if it's inappropriate, depending on the student. We do a lot of air hugs in my room. So, frame versus cameo, I'm assuming. This is in regards to a substitute teacher. It had an incident where the students was asked to leave a couple times and did not. Student addressed the student, he stood up, grabbed him by the arm, and didn't say forcefully, but the student tripped and fell against the wall. And then he was taken to court and was accused of battery, the tort of battery, and later was not found guilty. To reactive administration would be called escort. Without actually physically doing that, our protocol in my building would be to call administrator to come for assistance. Proactive, again, staff and district training, any volatile situation, anything like being disgruntled or anything like that, we know what our protocol is and how we would do it. We seek assistance before acting, and that's kind of our golden rule in our school. And now that's what's saying as long as no one is in immediate or direct danger. Professional ethics, evaluating the situation first, be sure to follow school district guidelines, and even as a substitute, to be sure you know those guidelines. And this will allow to use good judgment and also to be on top of our district's code of conduct. Flanagan and Canton, PE students were misbehaving in class. I thought this was interesting because I can see this happening anytime on any given day. They're misbehaving in class. The teacher kind of stopped him, came and get a little 411 about, straighten up kind of thing, dismissed them to go to the locker room to change back into their regular clothes, stayed back with the gym to talk with another student. In that meantime, another student pushed somebody, kid got hurt, and then the school sued this for the situation. And I thought it was interesting that they were accused and found guilty of negligence. And then the case study said it's 3 to 4 minute only, so it takes that little time. Reactive for our building, we're lucky that we have video cameras. I would check our hall camera, obviously not in the locker room. We don't have cameras, but in the hall from transitioning, just to make sure everything was appropriate and just so we have a timeline and a guideline. Immediate contact parents, be proactive in identifying a solution and just being upfront and forthcoming of all information. Be proactive, be sure policy in place for student supervision and safety. Make sure students are trained and engaged during that time. I know for us an issue typically is before school, after school. That supervision I think is a little sketchy at times, and so that's something we are constantly talking about. Have high standards for supporting policies, follow those guidelines, and then fulfill your duty as an educator. Rosenstein versus Ramsey School District. This was a middle school boy. I was reading this, I was shocked by this. Middle school's boy had been bullied and victimized for about 3 months, and it didn't give details specifically. It was all at school, outside of school, but at one point the boy was punched in the stomach, causing blood clot and eventually paralysis. It was reported to school officials, but situation was not monitored, and this is like 3 months prior to this becoming this extreme. Reactive, all reports of bullying should be taken seriously and comply with anti-bullying guidelines if you have them. This specific state that took place in New Jersey, they actually had state mandated guidelines for this, and the school was found not following them, the protocol. Being proactive, monitor, document, report an issue, train staff members, and follow through with that protocol. And eliminate repeat situations. That's what bullying is, over and over. We need to continue to monitor that and put things in place for that doesn't happen. Professional ethics. We are entrusted in the duty to protect our students, and we must do that with diligence, but not just in the educational standpoint and physical and mental capacity as well. This last case study just breaks my heart, and this is actually ongoing right now. It's something that happened, I don't know if it happened this year. I remember the date went to court this year, but it's Myers versus Cincinnati Public School. This is about an 8-year-old boy who had been severely bullied, and in one incident was even at the school, knocked unconscious in the bathroom. Had been there for about 7 years via the video camera was found. 2 days later, this 8-year-old boy committed suicide. At the time, parents were unaware of the incident up until later, after the fact, after they lost their son. Parents are pursuing reckless and unjust action by the school for liability, and so that they are not immune to a civil trial. Reactive, parents should be immediately informed, and both medical and emotional care should be addressed with that boy. Precautionary measures should immediately be put in place for future interactions, for they could not be taking place. And if that means, whoever the boy was, if it's multiple children, just being proactive. Reiterate to staff are required to report for a student to be active, to be in places such as bathrooms, to be in places such as locker rooms, and they have that firsthand experience to get to the students, for families. Professional ethics, and this just breaks my heart, but we must be sure students are never in a situation they feel so helpless their only solution is suicide. Students' safety is always first, and as educators, it's hard can't be in the minds, but we have to be aware and engaged in knowing what's going on. So a couple of things, my standards and reflection, but my reflection itself, I thought this was kind of an intense activity. It's kind of intimidating a little bit, but I think the main two things I learned, and I wanted to share this on this, is that number one, I can never be a lawyer. After reading through some of these case studies and stuff, I have to read them like 10 times to figure out what's going on. The mumbo jumbo, so that it kind of protects it, I think is kind of crazy. And then just from even like our code of ethics for our district, evaluate the situation and always, always, always ask for guidance whenever you're in doubt. Don't put yourself in a situation to be under litigation or anything in such way. Thanks.